Hey listeners, I'm Karen Riley Jeffers, NCSM's Eastern 2 Director. Welcome to our series, Learning with Leaders, Everyone Belongs in Mathematics. Thank you for joining me and my co-host Abel Maestas, the host of Teaching That Counts, as we talk with both leaders and influencers about their math journeys and contributions. Today, we will hear from our special guests about their inspiration, perceptions, and insights regarding instructional decisions that make the mathematics space welcoming and engaging to all. Listen and learn about how beliefs, practices, and policies must continue to advance to ensure that each and every person feels a sense of belonging in mathematics.
All right, welcome everybody to this month's podcast of NCSM Learning with Leaders. So welcome to this month. I'm so excited to have everybody listening, and I'm so excited for this episode. I think I say that every time, right, Karen? I'm so excited for. You know what? I feel like I say that on all the podcasts I do. I'm so excited, and how can you not be excited every time? Because we learn so much, right, Karen?
Yep, we do.
So, for new listeners, my name is Abel Maestas, and one of the two co-hosts of this podcast, and the other co-host is
Karen Riley Jeffers.
And we welcome everybody to the podcast this month. Well, as I said, I'm super excited to be able to continue our collaboration with the Journal of Mathematics Education Leadership. And this month, we're welcoming the authors of the journal entries for the most recent publication to share their work with us. So we'll go around very quickly. Go ahead, Karen. You want to say something?
Yeah, I was just saying, woohoo! Yay!
Woohoo! Yeah. So we'll go around very quickly and have them introduce themselves so everybody can get to know them before we dive into some of the questions. So we'll start with Corey. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Corey Webble. I'm an associate professor at the University of Missouri and the director of our elementary math specialist program here.
All right, we're going to go now to Jen.
Hi, my name is Jen Kruger. I am the director of K-12 professional learning at the Center for Professional Development and Education Reform, which is at the University of Rochester. I'm also a former middle school math teacher and mathematics coach.
Right. Thanks for being here. And Ryan.
Thanks, Abel. Ryan Gillespie, assistant professor of mathematics education at University of Idaho. And like Jen, I was a 17-year math teacher, instructional coach, and professional development provider prior to my work with University of Idaho.
All right, welcome. Eric.
Hi there, I'm Eric Partridge. I'm a clinical assistant professor of elementary mathematics education at the University of Alabama and a former elementary teacher in Seattle, Washington.
Kirk.
Sure. My name is Kirk Walters, and I am the vice president for the Center for Teaching and Learning at WestEd. We're a nonprofit research and technical assistance firm. We do work all over the country, a lot in California, where we were founded. I started my career off as a middle and high school math teacher for about 10 years in Southern California. For the last 20, I moved to the other coast and East Coast and have done work in research and evaluation at American Institutes for Research for a while and at WestEd most recently. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you again for being here with us today. And we'll get started.
So thank you again for being with us. Before we begin, I know you just introduced yourselves, but if you will share some of your journey in education that brought you together in your JMEL published work. So if we could begin with Ryan.
Sure. Jen, jump on in here because this is a saga and we'll keep it as direct as possible. But what was it, about a decade ago, we started working together as a joint NSF funded project between University of Idaho and University of Rochester. And the goal was to develop online synchronous learning activities for teachers in rural areas. So we were thinking about, well, pretty much all of Idaho is rural, and then upstate New York being rural. So we came together to think about how do we move, and this was pre-COVID, how do we move effective professional learning activities for teachers that we know are effective in person into an online space. And so we spent solid 4 years trying to think about that and working with different cohorts of teachers. And then it was a multi-activity PD model. And one of those was coaching. And I think coaching really elevated as one of those key components of the learning for the teachers. So the next project then was, well, how do we cultivate more coaches, and how do we provide access to professional learning for coaches working in rural areas? So we had another NSF funded project for another 4 years. And our work really came on the heels of our work with coaches. Our coaches, after, 2 cohorts, kind of asking for we need some type of tool to bring together this learning you provided. And so we created this tool, and that's kind of the focus of our work that we provided to our 3rd cohort. And then we brought some people back actually to kind of experiment with this coaching tool. And that's what we'll talk about eventually. Did I miss anything, Jen?
No, I was just going to add in that I think what's kind of cool about our journey together here is that we started out on these projects as kind of a practitioner side of providing and designing professional learning. And over the course of the 10 years, we both have, grown in our research journey as well. So, but I think we both kind of still sit in those 2 worlds of practitioner and researcher. And that's important to our work. And I think also is shown in the work that we'll talk about today.
Corey?
Yeah, I think I came to this work through a series of accidents. Actually, I started as a high school math teacher. I got really interested in curriculum. It was early 2000s, and I was kind of dealing with new mathematics curriculum, got really interested in that, and decided to go to grad school at Delaware. And the first thing they did on the first day I got there was, hey, you're teaching an elementary methods course or an elementary content course. And I thought, wow, okay, what's there to learn about this? And kind of got hooked. And I've really been doing elementary focused things ever since. When I came to the University of Missouri, I hadn't really thought that much about leadership, but Barbara Rees was here, and she was in the middle of writing a grant, had done some previous iterations to study elementary math specialists. A program had just been launched here in Missouri, and actually the state had just created a certification for elementary math specialists. And I jumped into that project, and eventually she retired and handed the reins to me, and so I became the PI of that project, and then followed that up with a NOIS project that funded several teachers to become elementary math specialist program. And the article that we're going to be talking about is based on that cohort of folks from NOIS. And then Eric came in as a grad student with elementary experience, so that was hugely helpful to have someone who spent a lot of time in an elementary classroom to come in and join with that NOIS project, helping on both the research side, but also just getting to know the participants and hanging out with them and understanding what it was like for them to be elementary, to transition from elementary teachers to being leaders in various capacities.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, you want to add to that?
Not too much to add. Yeah, I moved to Missouri to begin my PhD, and Corey had an elementary project, and so it felt like a good fit, and I've been working on it for several years now, and like he said, gotten to work both on the research side, but also get to know some of the teachers and their schools and the leader activities that they participate in more informally, which I think has provided an additional lens to thinking about leadership and to kind of complement the research avenues that we've kind of explored together over the past few years.
How about you, Kirk?
So, yeah, great question. I had a lot of fun working with my colleagues on this article for lots of reasons. One really fun thing about it is we all have experience as educators, as teachers. Some of us were coaches. And so writing to this audience was like, hey, we've got these measures that are validated, reliable, they're useful, but they're the kind of measures that a coach could actually use on the fly quickly, and it's not going to burden a teacher. And so the task of assembling all of these measures together in a way that they could be useful, consequential, was just fun to do as a group, because it feels like that's the whole point of research. When you learn something, if you can't apply it and connect it to people that actually use it, then it just, it's not as satisfying or as field building. So I think that's the high level thing. I think a second thing about this piece that was really great is that it really combined some of the work in continuous improvement. There's improvement science, that different forms of improvement science that, coaches and educators do this all the time. They're always trying to continuously improve, but having a sort of disciplined approach to what specifically am I trying to work on? that specificity lends itself really, really well to measures that can really give you the kind of signals to know if something's working, if not, the kind of tweaks that we make. So it felt like it was sort of giving a little more structure to some of the intuitive, natural, continuous improvement moves that all good coaches and teachers do.
Nice. Thank you.
Well, that's great. Thanks for introducing yourselves and letting everybody know who you are. I'm super interested in the small schools information. I'm working with some small school districts here in California, and they lack resources. They really do lack the resources that bigger school districts have, especially coaches. And when they do have coaches, they lack the resources. So being able to support those with those resources is really phenomenal. Let's get to our first question, though. Anyone that all our listeners out there know that we've been in a series since Karen and I took the reins, if you will, a little while ago. And our season series, which I think we're kind of going into our second half, like this is our second season, right? But this is our second season with the same kind of series. So it's everyone belongs in mathematics. So our leading question for all of our guests, which I'll ask all of you to chime in because this is really about what your thoughts are. What does it mean to belong in mathematics? And so we'll start with Eric, if that is okay. What does it mean to belong in mathematics?
To me, I think belonging is about a belief that you fit into a space. So in this case, in a mathematical space. So for my, elementary teacher lens, that's a belief for students that they have strong mathematical ideas or that they have ideas worth contributing to a discussion that their peers can learn from. But that extends to other spaces as well. As a recently graduated doc student, from belonging in that space can be feeling that you have something to contribute at a conference or have an idea that's worth other more seasoned peers hearing.
Thanks. How about you, Corey?
Yeah, I thought when I heard this question about some of the participants in this study, these are some of my favorite classrooms to visit. And when I visit those classrooms, they are spaces of joy. They are spaces where kids are excited to be thinking about math, be sharing their ideas. There's not a sense of hierarchy. Sometimes I'll be in a class and you'll kind of know these are the kids that everyone knows are the smart kids, and these are the kids that don't feel like they're hiding. And when I go to some of these other classes, it's just not there. Every kid's kind of excited to be there, excited to share, and they have a sense of just being included and being understood as important to the community. So that's what I thought of.
Thank you for that. Jen?
I mean, I agree with all that Eric and Corey have said, and I think it's really important. A sense of belonging to me is this idea that I have a space and I can do mathematics and I can see myself in that space. I think oftentimes kids think that, math is just for a certain group of students and that they kind of got the math gene, and I maybe didn't get the math gene. But to have a true sense of belonging in mathematics, I think it's you can see yourself doing that and you understand that anything that you can contribute is important to that conversation and important to others learning as well.
Thanks so much. Ryan?
Well, I would say opportunities to generate authentic ideas that come from one's own background and lived experiences and intuition. And then after being able to sort of generate authentic ideas, having true opportunities to sort of put those ideas forward into the community and have those ideas taken seriously in a safe way. So that it's not just, I was given a math problem to solve and I did it and that's great. But it's an opportunity for my ideas actually contribute to sort of the intellectual authority of the classroom. They're taken seriously. So it's the only thing I would add after all the wise comments from the others.
Mm-hmm.
Kirk?
Well, that is a big question and an important question. And I think one of the ideas that I am reminded of a lot is that human beings have a lot of belonging that's innate, that they're born with. from a young age. And there's so much in us that is logical, mathematical, sense-making that, sadly, it gets squeezed out of a lot of kids. And then later into adulthood, where you have this, the social stigma that I don't actually belong as a math person because of the message that people receive, not just in school, but in society. And I think opportunities that we have to give experiences, provide experiences for folks who can see mathematics as more than just arithmetic or procedures, but as a way of seeing the world, a way of making sense, relevance. We actually do belong mathematically more than we think. And I'm interested in people, programs, approaches that try to draw that out of people, because most people, it's in there. It's just been kind of, for lots of reasons, like the sort of the classic comparison is that literacy and reading don't have the same kind of negative stigma that's associated with mathematics, in part because of the way that mathematics is portrayed. And so that's sort of a high level take. And some of the measures that were included in this paper really do get at some of that sort of the self-reflection, self-efficacy. How do I view myself as a mathematician? My sense of belonging in a math classroom. And I think we're wise to measure those things when we can, because they're important signals.
Thank you for that. So continuing along that frame and lens of belonging, we'd like to spend some time connecting belonging to each of your work, which all have a different focus. So how does your work foster a sense of belonging in mathematics, either for students, teachers, or coaches? Kirk, how about you?
Yeah, another great question. I do think there are measures that do a really good job at providing signals related to an adult's perception of the mathematics environment, how it's supposed to be organized, who's doing the thinking, who's doing the work, the sense that whether all my students have the capacity or some of my students, those kinds of signals are really, really important, because they help a coach, they help a department chair, a mentor teacher say, you know what, if we don't attend to perspective taking, if we don't attend to how educators view their students as mathematical learners, it doesn't really matter what the curriculum is. It doesn't really matter what you wrap around it. Unless you attend to that, if you're getting some signals that say, we need to repair some of this, it's really important. If you don't ask, you don't know. I once heard a fantastic presentation. It was actually a couple of years ago at NCSM, where this innovative coach had done a social network analysis across the district. And the social network analysis was based on survey items. And the survey items, they were able to say at a high level whether here are 3 new teachers in the building and a coach who may not have the kind of asset-based approach that we would want a coach to have toward kids. And so that's a problem for us at a district level. If we're seeing that there are new teachers that are getting most of their information from perhaps someone who doesn't have the kind of mindset that we want, we need to make sure that those teachers are supported in a very specific way. If you don't measure those kinds of things and you're just looking at the benchmark test score, you're like, okay, we're low on fractions again. I think you're missing a really important intermediate kind of foundational step. And the measurement tools that are part of this particular repository, and this is not the only repository of measures, but it's free and it was supported by philanthropy, getting some of those good measures at mindsets of kids, mindsets of adults. And then also another thing that's exciting about the paper and the measures is you get the processes of teaching too. So you can actually, you can get a transcript of a short excerpt, and you can see in a 1-minute excerpt who's doing the talking, the nature of the talk. That's different than take an hour and record a video, and hopefully I'll have time to code it and come back 2 weeks. Like, but picking the right excerpt at the right time, you can provide the kind of coaching that's targeted and incremental and might actually make a difference. So I think that's some of the things I'm excited about in the paper and in the repository.
Yeah, that is some really, really great things that you pointed out. I know that I one time over the last couple of years have been doing empathy interviews with students in their math classes to get an idea of how they were feeling and what they were learning and how they were feeling about the class. So that would be a great place to go to help with those types of things too. Especially like the one you said about, giving the teacher data that they can use rather than having to go back and watch a video for an hour and a half and do all the analysis themselves.
And Jen?
All right. Well, I'm going to ask Ryan to kind of piggyback and jump in here because, we thought through this question and what we've come to realize in the last 10 years of working together is that we can kind of look at students, teachers, and coaches, and we look at these different levels across different levels. And our work kind of transcends across all three levels. All three levels are important to our work and the work that we do. So Ryan, you want to start with students, and then we can just kind of go back and forth and thinking about our work and the framework that we've developed around coaching?
Sure, absolutely. And by the way, just as a slight side note, we've appreciated this topic of belonging. I think Jen and I, maybe it's cheating, but we put our heads together and we reflected on our work. And we had never, when we kind of put together all of our coach learning and teacher learning, like belonging wasn't necessarily the focus, but to like reflect back on how belonging infiltrates everything we've done at those different levels of student, teacher, and coach was really fun. So thanks for putting that language into our reflective space. So anyway, back to what Jen prompted me to talk about. At the student level, so again, the article that we put forth, it really is a coaching tool. It's two parts. It's a coaching tool for math coaches and specialists to enact a content-focused coaching cycle, which is a coach and teacher coming together to plan, to then co-teach together, and then to reflect and debrief together. And so underneath all of that is sort of beliefs about the instruction that we're coaching towards. And in our coaching framework, we term it ambitious instruction. It goes by different names, teaching through problem solving or inquiry. A lot of people have different terminology, but I think at its heart, it's about creating space for kids to do that authentic mathematical thinking, to have their voices heard, which I think directly connects back to the idea of belonging. So that was our first connection, is that the instruction that this coaching framework promotes, targets, and supports teachers is about creating space that then in turn allows kids to feel like they belong. And I'll turn it back over to Jen, but I think that's a heavy lift for folks who are maybe trying to bring that type of instruction in their classroom as teachers, right? So the coaching becomes so important because we're, again, creating space for belonging, for authentic mathematical thinking, could be potentially in sharp contrast to other older paradigms for teaching math, where we're filling the space, we're telling kids what they need to say and do and think. And so coaching we've learned has a really pivotal role in supporting teachers. So Jen, you want to do the teacher layer?
Sure. So when we think about coaching and our framework and how it supports teachers, in coaching, we want, in content-focused coaching, one of our goals is really to increase teachers' content knowledge of mathematics, and then also to increase pedagogical content knowledge as well, and really help teachers to refine their craft. And so similar to the way we want to see teachers teaching students, when we think about coaches working with teachers, coaches can't just go in and tell teachers what they're going to do and how they're going to fix their instruction and how they're going to increase their content knowledge. And that's really important. So we want coaches to be able to create this space where teachers' voices are heard, where teachers can say what they want, what they're thinking of, what they want for their students. And then as a coach, we need to really think about how we listen to teachers and we can elevate those teachers. We want teachers to feel a sense of belonging, want them to see themselves as capable doers of mathematics. And you might think, well, of course, a math teacher would think that. And secondary math teachers do probably feel that sense of belonging in mathematics, but many elementary teachers are generalists. and don't necessarily have that sense. And so part of our work as a coach, we really feel too, is to help teachers see themselves as a capable mathematics teacher, as a thinker and doer of mathematics, to feel confident in the mathematics that they're teaching. And so that requires coaches to listen, to take teachers from where they're currently at and then help shift and move them forward. And we can't just jump where we want to be. Like, there might have to be some steps along the way. But again, it's this idea of, we don't want to go in and just push teachers and tell them what to do. We have to listen to the teachers and help cultivate that thinking and give them space, again, to open up and really kind of hear what they're saying and then take that information to help improve their instruction.
I do have a follow-up question that for either of you, because I'm curious, in terms of creating the space for students and then creating the space for teachers, like through your work, what did you find to be the most challenging aspect of that?
I mean, I would say that sometimes there is a misunderstanding from teachers around what a coach is and isn't. And sometimes teachers do want you just to say, just tell me how to do it. Just tell me what to fix. Tell me what to do. And so I think that is part of helping teachers to understand like what coaching is. It's the same, again, parallel to students. Sometimes students, I think, when we have complex instruction or we have inquiry-based or ambitious teaching, they just are like, can you just tell me what to do? And we really, as teachers, have to kind of step back and have students give them the space to think. And I think the same thing happens in coaching.
Maybe I'll just share one more thought in response to Karen's question. I think one of the biggest challenges is we've met a lot of coaches that they might have a lot of success in creating belonging with their students and feel a sense of belonging as a teacher. And then they get sort of thrust into a coaching role, oftentimes very rapidly and oftentimes without support. And Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of our very first cohorts in our Sync On for Coaching program, we went around and introduced ourselves. What's your coaching background? And was it 5 minutes? It was like 5 minutes prior to the meeting. The person found out they were going to become a coach. They were maybe thinking ahead that they'd take this, and then it turns out we were getting thrown in. And so it can happen rapidly that suddenly there's this big identity shift of it's not your classroom anymore. Your learners are now teachers. And I think that's so much of where our energy has gone in the article we wrote and the coaching framework we're presenting in that article. And kind of like Abel said, especially in rural areas. So somebody gets tapped to do this work, and suddenly now they're trying to create space for a teacher to create space for students. And so there's these layers that they're trying to navigate. And so doing that with intentionality, so that it's not just doing like having conversations with teachers or not just, hey, let's co-teach together, but doing things that intentionally cultivate learning for the teachers, which then flows downhill to students. That's hard. That's tricky work. And so that's maybe just one more thing I'd add.
Thank you. So as it pertains to belonging for your work, Corey and Eric, I'd like you to have a chance to respond to that. And then if there was anything that you wanted to add on to the conversation as well.
Yeah. First, this idea of kind of the evolution of leaders and how they think of themselves. That's some of the things we were able to explore in the paper, and I do want to talk about the different ways that kind of happen for different individuals. But as far as belonging, one of the things I thought of was when I mentioned I first came to Mizzou. We started this project. We were following our graduates of our elementary math specialist program out, and I remember very vividly this experience of talking to one of the graduates, and she was the only elementary math specialist in her school. And when I was talking to her, she was basically like, "No one knows I have this certificate. My principal doesn't know. My teachers don't know, and I just kind of do my own thing in my class." And it was almost like she was hiding or like nervous. She seemed very isolated to me. And this is what I've seen kind of over and over again across the state is there were folks who just kind of put into these roles and they're kind of alone, or they're not in there, but there's a teacher who happens to have this, certification, but they're very isolated. And so when we got the Noise Project, one thing I intentionally did was try to recruit folks in teams from schools. So I tried to recruit at least 2, sometimes 3 teachers from a school so that they would have a person doing this experience with them. If they were experiencing challenges in their schools, they could collaborate on those. We built those into the assignments, work together to develop a plan for your school, share that. And then I think there was also a sense of just community within our cohort. So we had kind of two different cohorts, a group of about 11 and one group of 13. And in one of those cohorts, just a quick anecdote that just, I think, revealed the power of the community. The district where all of these teachers taught had asked them to do a series of professional development. This was like in the middle of COVID, so it was online professional development, super hard to do. And so they each sort of like broke into these groups and did these projects, and we came to debrief. And one of the groups, just from their perspective, their PD that they had done had just crashed and burned. And we'd watched the video, and they were sharing different parts of it that didn't go well, and just to watch the other members of this cohort step in and say, actually, I loved what you said, and I've already used 2 or 3 things from what you said. I thought your engagement was really great during this part. And so and I remember thinking, if this team or, individual had done this professional development and not had that experience afterwards to debrief it, they probably would have said, I'm never doing this again. That was a failure. I'm terrible at this. I can't do it. But to have the cohort come alongside them and say, just provide this. I mean, it was person after person after person of just like these supportive, encouraging comments. Just illustrated to me the power of the community, the power of not being isolated, the power of having others that are kind of going through this journey together. So that, to me, that's what I thought of when I thought of what is belonging. It's like, I belong in this community, and I belong in this position of, designing, enacting professional development for teachers.
Kind of adding into that, as Jen was talking about, teachers and the sense of belonging for teachers in mathematics, I was thinking about how also kind of embedded in this idea of belonging is a sense of agency, right? And that makes me think about Corey's first example about the teacher who was all alone and felt like they couldn't really do anything. And so I think one thing that we didn't really touch on explicitly in talking about belonging at the beginning was this sense of agency. But it feels important both for students, like that they have some sense of autonomy. Ryan mentioned like intellectual authority in the classroom, but also for teachers, right? That they have some sense of decision-making power in how things are getting, enacted in their classroom and whatnot. And I think that probably goes for school leaders as well, and navigating the pressures of district expectations and family pull and all the things that they're getting, weighed down from the state level as well. One thing as I thought about this question kind of related to our work is we looked at the conceptions of some of the teachers as leaders over from the start of the 2-year EMS program, Elementary Math Specialist program, to the end of the program. And so we kind of, from the ground up, came up with these conceptions along the dimensions of confidence and awareness, which I think tie especially confidence into that sense of agency and sense of belonging. But I think these different conceptions of how these teachers saw themselves as leaders and how they grew over the 2 years really ties to that sense of belonging as a leader, because most of them were not in formal leadership positions. They were classroom teachers, but who, like Corey mentioned, have this additional training and this additional expertise to be able to support fellow teachers, but they're not in, hierarchical positions of authority there. And so we saw some teachers, there were 2 teachers at the very beginning who we characterized their conception of themselves as like apprehensive, right? Unsure, not very confident in themselves as potential leaders. And then, when we talked to those teachers towards the end of the program, we saw them grow, to be either emerging or optimistic in their conception of themselves as leaders. And so it's easy, again, I think kind of like Jen was getting at, it's easier to think about students in the sense of belonging in mathematics and the challenges that have historically come up and continue to persist, but also thinking about teachers and how can, teachers who are working as informal leaders, like the way they conceive of themselves as, do I belong as a leader? Do I have something that I think can contribute to my school and to my colleagues? That seems to have a big influence on, the kinds of actions or scope of work that they saw for themselves.
Yeah, that's clearly an intersection between your work there in establishing that belonging among leaders, coaches, and teachers. And that is one thing that we talk a lot about student belonging on our podcast. I think out there in general, we talk a lot about student belonging, but how do we hit the teacher aspect? And it just goes back to one thing that Jen had said about how a lot of secondary teachers, they come out of college as math specialists, or they've come out with a huge confidence and agents and positive agency in mathematics. But a lot of times elementary, it's different, not always that way. Sometimes I know my daughter had a teacher at one point that was a little fearful of mathematics, so that year math teaching got put on the back end because the teacher was nervous about teaching the math. So I can see how that's a very important piece. So that being said, how can give one tip that you can to leaders, teachers, coaches, that can support a sense of belonging, that's not only within themselves if they're coaches, but also I would also think some of the coaches, excuse me, some coaches that work in a district I work in, they're administrators, right? That are above those coaches. That those are the ones that they're the ones that lead the coaches. What could administrators do to help coaches feel a sense of belonging? What can the coaches also do to have the teachers and other leaders feel a sense of belonging? And how does that connect it to your work? Give one tip that they could be doing to help create a sense of belonging among the leaders, the coaches, the teachers, to then kind of spill into the classroom. We'll start with Eric. You ended us off, so why don't you start?
Yeah, thanks. I think an important thing is, how do we expand what it means to do and be good at mathematics? If mathematics is strictly about getting correct answers quickly, there's a pretty clear hierarchy in who that is for. If from the student lens, if good math teaching is about getting high math test scores, then there's a pretty clear hierarchy of who's good at that. And so kind of creating greater space for success of doing mathematics and teaching mathematics to include things around collaboration and representation and expressing and explaining thinking, understanding thinking of others, asking questions. And so by expanding the space of what it means to do and be good at mathematics and teaching mathematics, I think it creates more space for other people to belong and for people to have a sense of agency with the subject.
One of the assignments that we did with our cohort for the elementary math specialist program was to take a semester, and you kind of know your class and pick one student who, for a variety of reasons, might be kind of a marginalized student in mathematics, like a kid that's maybe on the outskirts, is not sort of able to participate, and get to know that student, and make a special effort to support that student's a sense of belonging. Really, how can they be included in this mathematical community more fully? And the idea is not that that's the only student who might need that, but if you really focus on one student and what they need and how they're experiencing mathematics class, the idea is you become more aware of other students who are also maybe having a similar experience, and you develop some strategies in some ways. And so that was an assignment that they did for their coursework, and then they kind of shared that at the end of it. So here's a student this is their experience, this is what I did, this is how it changed. And I remember getting an email from a teacher who, this was about their test scores, but their test scores had gone up by so much. It was like, okay, like, I'm not gonna whatever you think about test scores, the idea that you took a student who was not being successful, and now you've sort of, she was just so excited in this email about, like, look at this score, like exclamation point after exclamation point of how excited they were that the student had kind of turned things around. So yeah, that felt like one thing that we did that was sort of powerful for a teacher to sort of spend the time to really focus on one student and their needs.
All right, thanks for that, Corey. How about Ryan?
Well, so our work is really centered on the very specific professional development activity of a coaching cycle. Jen and I are big believers in it, the transformative power of a coaching cycle as members of our team. So this is going to be a shameless self-promotion, but the article we forward this coaching framework that was a labor of love, many years of working with research teams and practitioners to and we'd love for people to go use it. We create it for others and again, I'll back up a smidge on that, and Jen, please jump in on this. What we've learned about coaching cycles and to be transformative, you have to really focus on learning for the teacher, right? For the teacher and the student. And it's really easy when you come together as a coach and a teacher to get into acts of doing. So for example, we're going to come together in the planning phase. We're going to plan a lesson together. It can be really easy to focus on, like, let's just get a really great lesson. And you can, right? You can get a great lesson and you can get it to students, but that's sort of a one-time thing. And it can be really easy to focus on producing a good lesson rather than, as a coach, thinking about how do I produce this lesson with this teacher and cultivate new learning that's going to go beyond this coaching cycle, that's going to support their students in the long term. So you're kind of holding both of those things at the same time as a coach. And so that was at the heart and soul of our work, that coaching can't just be acts of doing with short-term benefits. We have to act intentionally so there's long-term growth. And I think that's why we hope others will pick up the tool and maybe let us know how it works and how they use it and those kinds of things. And then same with the other parts. Co-teaching. It can be super fun to go into classrooms together and co-teach. And you take this side of the room and I'll take this side of the room. And but that's not the kind of co-teaching we describe in our framework. It's how does the coach help a teacher? When you create space, that's a very different dynamic of teaching. So we're going to create this space. How do we practice getting really in tune with what students are saying and doing and learning how to listen to our students? And that's the kind of learning that we hope comes out of a coaching cycle that transcends that one-time activity. So and it's been fun. We've had a lot of really powerful stories, kind of like Corey shared, of watching these powerful moments in classrooms then turn into powerful moments in the debriefing conversations and that powerful moment for the coach reflection. So yeah, so I guess to circle back to the self-promotion thing, I would invite folks to take a look at that tool and maybe modify and use it however, but to really keep in mind that coaching cycles are about teacher learning, not about one-time impact.
I was just going to piggyback off of Ryan and our framework. And one thing that I think is important to recognize about our framework is that it really allows entry for coaches, no matter where they are in their own learning, in their own expertise and experience around coaching. So when we developed it, it's developed as a continuum of first steps, next steps, and peak performance. And so our first steps are meant to, like, I could go do this tomorrow and it would be the first step into coaching. And then it, moves along the continuum to peak performance, which is like the coach working themselves out of the job because they've given the teacher, they've equipped the teacher with the tools that they need. And my own personal positionality to that is so important because I, like many teachers turned into coaches, was kind of thrust into the position. I was great as a teacher. I had been this informal teacher leader, kind of taking on the role. And then all of a sudden I got deemed coach. And as Ryan mentioned, working with adults was not the same as working with my students, and it didn't transfer. And I knew what peak performance looked like, but I had no clue how to get there. So having a framework like the one that we created would have been amazing for me to be able to enter into it and have access to this first step. This is what I need to do to get started, and then I can start to move along the continuum. So we've had, as Ryan said, people that have been 5 minutes into coaching and they're looking at those first steps, and we've worked with others. Even we were talking today ourselves who have been coaching for over a decade, and we would still pick up this tool and find a place where we can enter in it. So I think that accessibility of the tool is really important, just like it's important when we give students math tasks, we want them to have entry into it. When we give support to teachers or to coaches, we want to have an entry point for them as well.
Cool. Right on that. I'll let you know. I'm looking at it down and seeing how I could use it in my coaching, my work here too. So go ahead, Kirk.
Yes. One tip. That's a great question. I have several. I would say one thing that you can do as a leader or coach is you can offer to be a listener and to listen for something specific. And it could be that you're using a tool like we mentioned in the repository that quickly transcribes an excerpt of a lesson if the teacher's ready for it. Or it could be, here's a lesson routine in your core curriculum that's really challenging. I'm going to come in for 10 minutes, whatever you tell me. I'm going to take notes, and then we're going to talk about that one specific thing. And I think the attitude there is we're all in this together, and teaching is complex and it's honored in that way. And what a coach is trying to do is help unpack that complexity. And it's honoring to the teacher. It's honoring to the kind of instruction we're trying to deliver. That would be one tip.
All right, Karen. We're just about towards the end here, so I'll let you get us to the end.
Yes. So thank you for sharing about the coaching tool that we can use. Corey and Eric, is there anything else that you want our listeners to know in particular about the work that you that's in the article?
Well, I just have a kind of a broader thought maybe. I've learned a lot over the last 10, 12 years about leadership. And I think our field as a whole is sort of trying to figure out, like, I think we know a lot about effective mathematics instruction, and we know a lot about effective professional development and those kinds of things. What we are struggling with, I think, is to sort of how do we have impact at scale? How do we sort of influence instruction in a large scale way? And I think people are trying different things. They're trying kind of incremental approaches. Are you doing like this immersive PD that's super expensive and hard to sustain? And I feel like our work, and really the work of NCSM, is to sort of put your eggs in the basket of leadership. How do we develop school-based leaders who, live and work in the schools, who have the expertise that's needed, but they also have the trust and relationships with the people who, make decisions in their building and make decisions at district levels and state levels? That feels to me like a investment. And I'm seeing and believing and wanting to explore the promise of that kind of investment in this kind of school-based local leaders. Like the people that I work with in this program are having a much bigger impact than I could ever have from my position here at the university.
Kirk, how about you?
I think, well, first of all, I really appreciate this organization, this publication, and what this group is really trying to accomplish. And every time I'm engaged, I'm inspired by what you all are about. So, and so that's the first thing. I think as the field, and as you know, there are buzzwords that come in and out of our field, and there are people that look for silver bullets. It's important to have high quality instructional materials. Yes, it is. It's also important to be supported in implementing those materials and to have professional learning. I think the next thing to think about, and some places have already been thinking about this, but I think as a field, we need to be thinking, how do we ensure that all the adults in a building are aligned in terms of their mindsets, in terms of the materials themselves, so that we're all rowing in the same direction, particularly for students who might need a little extra support. We're trying to bring up to grade level, for example. If they're getting a different model of instruction in teaching fractions, for example, different set of representations, different approach. And if the paraprofessionals and professionals who are trying to work in this space are not trained and given a chance to collaborate, I think we're missing opportunities for coherence and for driving more systemic instructional improvement. Sure, people are doing this in places, but I think as a field and as a group of math education leaders and thinkers, we should lean into that, and we should, instead of, and I'll say this as a researcher, I think there's a strand of research in special education, and there's a strand of research in math education, and they don't always meet in the middle. And I think there is more meeting in the middle, but fewer silos, more coordination, more coherence, because I think that's what our students deserve.
All right. Well, we'd like to thank all of our guests today for being here. Before we leave, can you let listeners know about how they might be able to learn more about your work and where to go to find more about it, besides JMEL, because they could just read the articles too? We'll start with Jen.
Well, you could obviously just go to Google Scholar and look up some of the work that have been published. And then also, like I said, I work in the Center for Professional Development and Education Reform, and we do work locally in New York State, but also across the nation. And so if you're interested in even just professional learning or, again, any research around that, you could always look that up as well at the Warner School at the University of Rochester.
Thanks so much. Ryan.
Well, very similar to what Jen said. And I know you said don't say JMEL, but I kind of want to, just because of the fact that we picked that outlet because it's open access and it's not hidden behind subscription paywalls. Like, we wanted our work to find practitioners. So, and our contact information's in there too, but it's open access. So if I would really invite people to go read and let us know how it works. And then Google Scholar and all the other things, you can search us and find the other things we've done. But so sorry to go against your ask to not say JML, but
that's okay. I'm sure if JML's listening, somebody there's listening, what did Abel just say? Don't say. No, we really appreciate and love JML. I just figured since it's part the whole point of the podcast. So I just figured since it's in the title, there might be some other ways that people can get some more information about you. But yes, go to JML. Wonderful place to find information. Eric.
I'm newer in the education research realm and in a clinical position, so probably doing a little bit less research than the other people on the call here. But me and some colleagues have a piece coming out in AMT Connections. We interviewed some practicing teachers to get some feedback on their teacher ed program experience. And we have 3 particular calls to action that came out of that research for math teacher educators in particular to be thinking about. So if that's you and you're listening, that should be out sometime this calendar year.
Awesome. Thank you. Corey.
Well, I'm delighted that I'm on a podcast. So the fact that people will maybe hear about this work through that's fantastic. So thank you for this opportunity. Google Scholar, again, is probably the best way to just find other work. Although I also want to say, if there are listeners out there who are thinking a lot about math education and getting into research, and you're not already doing research, we have a fantastic PhD program at the University of Missouri, and love to just do a shameless plug there for checking out our program and seeing if you might be interested in joining us.
I'll vouch. They do have a pretty good program with some pretty quality faculty members. Just another plug for Corey. Corey and my colleague at the University of Alabama, Dr. Susan Oslander, are 2 people doing a lot of research in the elementary math specialists programs realm. There's not a lot of other people I know that do a lot of research in that. And I think that as a, thinking about a sustainable way of providing people with the skill set and knowledge base to be these school-based leaders, these kinds of programs are things both worth looking into if you're interested in being a math leader, or a relatively smaller bucket of research that is worth exploring.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. Corey, is that online?
Well, now that Eric said that, so our elementary math specialist master's programs are online. Our PhD program is not online. We have an EDD program that recently started that is online, but not the PhD.
Yeah,
Kirk?
My email, I believe our email is in the paper, kwalters@wested.org. I would love to hear questions, not just about the article, but if there are things, and my colleagues, my co-authors could not be here today, but it would be a team effort. If you email me, I will loop in all of them, and there might be questions that you have that are related to the piece or adjacent to the piece. I think the work that I'm involved in and our team at Wested is really just trying to identify problems of practice that are relevant, that are driven, from the field. And we have multiple projects going on right now that touch different aspects of instructional leadership and instruction. And there could be opportunities, funded opportunities, if people are interested and it's aligned with their work, where we could be of support. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Again, thank you to our guests. Wonderful, wonderful articles in the latest JMEL. So make sure you go out and read that. And thank you, everybody, for joining us in this wonderful episode of the Learning with Leaders podcast. And hope to have you all back, listeners, listening to us next month. And we'll talk to everyone soon.
We hope that you have been inspired by this bold mathematics leadership conversation and will tune in to our podcast series each month. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. You can learn more about NCSM leadership and mathematics education and our upcoming professional learning events on the NCSM website, mathedleadership.com. You can also follow NCSM on the X at mathedleaders and using the hashtag NCSMBold. Until next time.